cultural relativism, identity politics, biophobia, the fear of using biology to explain human affairs, militant feminism, critical race theory. Each of these is an idea pathogen. So as I was trying to think of some common thread that runs through all these idea pathogens, very much like if I were an oncologist, I may be someone specializing in pancreatic cancer, which is very different than melanoma. And yet, of course, all cancers at least share the one mechanism of unchecked cell division, right? So even though they might manifest themselves and project through different trajectories, there is some consilient commonality across all cancers. And so I was trying to look for a similar synthetic explanation for what do all these idea pathogens have in common. And here's where I'm going to be charitable.
Okay.
I think that these idea pathogens start off from a noble place. And they start off from a desire to pursue a noble cause. But regrettably, in the pursuit of that noble cause, then they end up, they meaning the proponents of those idea pathogens, end up willing to murder truth in the service of pursuing that otherwise noble goal, right? So, for example, if we take equity feminism, most people who are going to be watching this show are probably equity feminists. I'm an equity feminist, and if I can speak for you, I bet you're an equity feminist, which means basically what? We are, men and women should be equal under the law. There should not be any institutional sexism or misogyny against one sex or the other. So the Christina Huff Summer position. So we can start off with that being a great idea.
Right. Well, we could even push that a little bit further and say that if we had any sense, we'd want the sexes to be open up to equal exploitation, so to speak, because everybody has something to offer, and that only a fool would want to restrict half the population from offering what they have to offer, even if he was driven by nothing but self-interest.
Fair enough. Great. And so the problem then arises when militant feminism comes in. They argue that in the service of that original goal, in the desire to squash the patriarchy and the status quo and so on, we must now espouse a position that rejects the possibility that men and women are distinguishable from one another. Not better, not worse, but there are evolutionary trajectory that would have resulted in recurring sex differences that are fully explained by biology and by evolution. Well, militant feminists will reject that, and hence they'll suffer from biophobia, another idea pathogen, in the service of that original noble goal. So I'll just do one more if I may. Cultural relativism, the idea that there are no human universals, each culture has to be identified based on its own merits and so on. Again, it starts off with a kernel of truth. It seems to make sense. The gentleman who first espoused this, Franz Boas, the anthropologist out of Colombia, was trying to stop the possibility that people might use biology in explaining differences between cultures and so on, and therefore
and justify them that way.
Exactly, and
right. That the biologists would say this is how it is, and therefore that's how it should be.
Exactly. So, in the service of that original noble goal, they then end up building edifices of evidence for the next 100 years where the word biology is never uttered, right? I mean, and that's been my whole career, right? Which is I go into a business school and I look at organizational behavior and consumer behavior and personnel psychology and all of the other panoply of ways that we manifest our human nature in a business context. And never do we ever mention the word biology. Well, how could you study all of these purposive, important behaviors without recognizing that humans might be privy to their hormonal fluctuations? To me, it seems like a trivially obvious statement to most economists. This is hearsay. What do hormones have to do with the economy? So again, you start off with Franz Boas having a noble cause, but then it metamorphosizes into complete lunacy in the service of that original noble goal. So I think if I were to look for a consilient explanation as to why all these idea pathogens arise, it's because they start off with a kernel of truth, with a noble cause, but then they metamorphosize into bullshit.
All right, so here's another way that they might be conceptualized as parasites too. Imagine that the academy has built up a reputation, which is like a a reputation is like a storehouse of value in some sense. So you get a good reputation if you trade equitably with people, and then your ability to trade equitably is relatively assured in the future, right? You'll be invited to trade. And so reputation is like a storehouse in some sense. Now, academia, at least in principle, or the intellectual exercise, has built up a certain reservoir of goodwill, which is indicated by the fact that people will pay to go to universities to be educated. And the hypothesis there is that the universities have something to offer that's of practical utility, of sufficient magnitude so that the cost is justifiable. You go to university and you come out more productive. And the reason you come out more productive is because the intellectual enterprise that the university has been engaged in has had actual practical relevance. And you might justify that claim by pointing to the fact that the technological improvements that have been generated in no small part by raw research have radically improved the standard of living of people everywhere in the world. And some of that's a consequence of pure academic research, a fair bit of it, pure scientific research. Now, what happens is that other ideas come along that don't have the same functional utility, but have the same appearance. And so they're not so much they don't so much parasitize individuals, let's say, as they parasitize the entire system. Yeah. The system has built up a reputation because it was offering solutions of pragmatic utility, even training students to think clearly and to assess arguments clearly and to communicate properly has tremendous economic value if you do it appropriately, because that means they can operate more efficiently when they're solving problems. Now, but once that system is in place, with its academic divisions and its modes of proof and all of that, it can be mimicked by systems that perform the same functions putatively, but don't have the same pragmatic, they don't have the same history of demonstrating practical utility.